All right, hi you guys, and welcome to the chapter chat for chapter 6 of Elie Wiesel's Night. I'll do this again just for some consistency, and maybe in the off chance that somebody who's not one of my English 10 students stumbles onto this, they'll have some idea what it is that we're talking about in this YouTube channel. So chapter 6, there are a few things that I want to talk about, a couple like events or plot situations, and then I kind of want to dig into some structural design choices that Wiesel makes, return to some of the questions that I asked about strength and connection in the chapter 6 chapter chat, or chapter 5 chapter chat. Sorry, you can tell that I'm already getting confused by all of this. So in the very beginning of chapter 6, they're marching. This is called the final solution. So you guys should be doing the section on your web quest along with this reading about the final solution. And the idea was that they would just take all of these Jewish inmates out on these 20, 30 mile walks in the snow, and they were just gunning people down in these marches. And the idea was that they could just massively kill whoever was still standing as the Russian troops are starting to come in and make some progress in trying to liberate some of these camps. So if you look up the final solution, that's really what we're seeing being reflected in these couple of chapters 6 and 7. So as they're marching, the SS made us increase our pace. Faster, you tramps, you flea-ridden dogs. And again, they keep talking about these filthy dogs. And that's how they're referring to the Jews. This continues to reflect that enemy image that we talked about when we first started talking about dehumanization in chapter 2, and how that idea of creating an enemy image through language is really important if you're going to be able to treat people in these horrific ways. So Hitler was really mindful to use this kind of animal language and to use references to like being dirty and fleas when he was creating this enemy image. And so when I read this section, I can't help but think about how much these German soldiers have kind of internalized that enemy image. If that's the way that they are talking to these people, even under these circumstances, that they've really kind of internalized and come to believe that Jewish people are dirty, flea-ridden, less than human beings. I'm going to try to link a video about peanut butter and jelly racism. That sounds a little bit funny, but it's a resource that I often use when I ask students to think about how we come to believe in stereotypes, and if we have any control about the stereotypes that we come to kind of know and accept. And so I'm going to encourage you to watch that quick video when you're done with this chapter chat. A second thing that I wanted to bring up is in the last chapter chat, I talked about Elie Wiesel's newfound strength, right? When he is pissed off at God, he's so angry, and he's kind of disconnected himself from the group of people in the concentration camp that are praying. He has disconnected himself from his faith in God, and in that he feels strong. But in this chapter, on page 86, he talks about his relationship with his dad and his connection to his dad. And he says that my father's presence was the only thing that had stopped me from falling into death. So in the paragraph right before that, he's saying that death and the desire for death is starting to consume him. He just wants to lay down in the snow, and he just wants to be done. He doesn't want to fight anymore, but his connection to his father is what keeps him going. And throughout these few chapters, we're really starting to see how much the bond between the two of them gives them hope to keep going, or gives them the strength to keep fighting. If maybe not for themselves, then maybe for the other person. And so I just wanted to kind of revisit that question about whether or not we find strength in connection to other people, or if we find our strength when we kind of disconnect ourselves from them. So I don't know the answer to that question. It's probably different for each of us, but it's one that I want for you guys to maybe keep thinking about. I think it's a question that Wiesel poses for us to consider. On page 89, and there's a section where he talks about walking around this, around a cemetery is what he calls it. So they've stopped for a moment. And he says, all around me, what appeared to be a dance of death. My head was reeling. I was walking through a cemetery. Not a sound of distress, not a plaintive cry, nothing but mass agony and silence. And again, something rebelled me against death. Death which was settling in all around me, silently, gently. It would seize upon a sleeping person, steal into him, and devour him bit by bit. And so at this point in the story, again, we're seeing that death has just become such a part of his normal existence, and he's starting to really feel enticed by the idea of just having it be over. Which, if I think about the conditions that they're in, so they do not have appropriate clothing, they're absolutely starving to death, and they've been marching at this point for 20 kilometers. I should have looked up what that math is, but it's lots and lots of miles, like 14 is my guess, miles that they've been marching and running. And so I can only imagine that in that moment, that's that just laying down and dying might feel like the better of the two options. Okay, there are two more things that we should talk about that happen that are really impactful moments in this chapter. The first is Rabbi Elihu's son. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but Rabbi Elihu comes in and asks Eliezer if he has seen his son. They accidentally got separated when at some point while they were marching, and they haven't seen him, of course, but afterwards Eliezer recalls that he had seen his son leave him on purpose. And at the bottom of page 91, he says, "O God, master of the universe, give me the strength never to do what Rabbi Elihu's son has done." So in his need to protect himself, the rabbi's son had left his father. That was kind of a drain or was making it harder for him to survive. And in that moment, we can kind of see the trajectory of what happens when people suffer. And so I'm going to link a second thing on this video too. It's Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. And it's a psychological principle. For some of you who've taken psychology classes, it'll be familiar to you. But the basic premise of Maslow's research shows that there are all of these basic needs that people need in order to be moral. Right? And when those needs aren't being met, we kind of revert to kind of an animalistic, primal way of being, that our ability to be moral and to do the right thing and to think through problems really depends on whether or not we're fed and have slept and belong to a group and have our needs for safety being met. And so we can see kind of that historical process or that psychological process happening in just how the Jewish inmates are responding to not having their needs met. The final moment that I want to talk about in this chapter is Juliek playing the violin the night before he dies. That's another one of those moments that's really impactful. It makes me think about the Never Shall I Forget poem that we read in chapter 3, that this moment is one of those moments in a year of absolute suffering that Eliezer will never forget. And just the contrast of the beautifulness of the song and in the silence, in a pile of people who are dying, and that's kind of his last breath, is a really powerful moment in this text. Okay, and then the final thing, we end this chapter with the Jewish inmates being put back into cattle cars. When I see that happen, it reminds me that this text is is a memoir that's written really intentionally to help us to feel or be affected in particular ways. So this is kind of a long conversation to have. I'm going to try to have it really quickly. At this moment, we are exactly 20 pages from the end of the story. When they are first put on cattle cars, it's exactly 20 pages from the beginning of the story. And so it's almost perfectly sandwiched. The entire story, kind of introduction stuff, the meat of the story happens. They get on cattle cars, and then the conclusion of the story. So although this is a true story, it's a memoir, it's a person recalling an event that happened in their life. That's what a memoir does. I think it's important to think about the structural choices that Wiesel has made, right? And how that connects to his particular purpose. He's not just telling us a story from start to finish. He's carefully selecting different scenes and different memories and different events, and he's structuring them in a way to have the most impact on us. So when I get to this point in the story, it always reminds me of how intentional he is when writing it. And in the preface, he tells us he wrote, 152 drafts of this story, and that he just kept trying to get it right. This is the final product. So the way that it sits right now is how he considers it being right. And these kind of structural decisions that he makes, I don't know why he makes them. I can't ask him. He's not with us anymore, but he definitely makes them. So I want for you to maybe take a second and think about why he structures it in this way. And does that help it to be more impactful for you? Does it help you to better understand what the experience is like? And does it help you feel more motivated to kind of be an activist in your own way to prevent history from repeating itself in this way again? So that is my chat for chapter 6. We'll move into 7 tomorrow. 7 is a really intense chapter. So be prepared. This is you're going to see some stuff in this chapter that's probably going to shock and amaze you and will make your list of things that you will never forget. And I'll probably do 7, 8, and 9 all in one chapter chat, since we are going to finish the book in our next just kind of one read. Outside of that, please leave comments if you have questions about anything that I talked about. Look at the links that I put there for further exploration of some of the ideas that we talked about in this chat, and enjoy the last few chapters of this book. See you later.